back with NFL Pro Bowler Matt Light. And before we left for break, we were talking about your foundation. So for people who don't know, kind of give us a breakdown on what the foundation is about and what it does.
Yeah, we're all about the outdoors, really. I mean, it's most of what we do are programs geared towards getting kids into the outdoors through leadership camps and life skills that we do in a very unique way, right? And we use the outdoors for a reason, because most of the kids we work with, are these inner city kids, the kids that, don't have people that can take them into the outdoors, or, they're not in an area where the outdoors is really even an option. So we try to do things like going out and hitting the gun range, or shooting some bows, or teaching them how to make ancient throwing spears and things that, young men like to do, right? And through that, we ask them to do what we say is be real, be responsible, be ethical, be accountable. And at the end of the day, we hope that they become leaders in whatever form or fashion that may be, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you, man, 600-acre facility in Ohio is where we do a lot of that. We bring these kids in from all over the country. And whether it's, one of those kind of leadership camps, or it's a football camp, or it's any number of things that we do with using the outdoors as a teaching base. The bottom line is it comes down to spending time with these young people, and that's what they need. I mean, they don't need, they don't need to be given a whole lot.
Yeah.
What they need is time, and that's the one thing that we feel like we can offer these kids in a unique way. I got an amazing staff, and I encourage anybody to go to our website, mattlight72.com. If you ever have any questions about what we do or how we do it, we get all the information there. And like I said, we love what we do.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, and you said it best. It was like I think people tend to overcomplicate what needs to happen with a lot of the younger generation of people growing up in certain areas. Like, it's not that complicated. A lot of it is really just giving that attention that needs to be given, and giving them that time, and then showing them different experiences outside of their immediate world. That does a lot to transform someone and to make them realize their own inner potential. And so
yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, it's and it's amazing to see that too. One of our programs is a 4-year program where they come in during that awkward kind of phase between 8th grade and freshman year, right?
Yeah.
And they try to figure out who they are. Some of them come in with their chest pumped and they think they got all the answers, and it's that awkward time for a young man, and then they graduate the program 4 years later. And during that time, it's unbelievable to watch these young men. And I'm lucky. Again, I've got my mom and my mother-in-law who do all the cooking for these kids for the 2 weeks that they're in camp. I got my dad. And the one thing that blew my mind the first year that we worked with these young men is that I thought my dad would be a guy that they all hated, because he doesn't take, he's going to toe the line. He's not going to sugarcoat anything.
Gotcha.
And we had a kid step out of line one time when we were shooting bows, and you don't do that. And number one, you don't do that, period. But you don't do that around my father. And I remember my dad picked him up and said, "Hey, son, you won't make that mistake again." Set him back down. And I'm like, oh. But what blew my mind is that when we left that camp that year, every one of those kids made sure they had my dad's information.
Wow.
Because they respected him, and he commanded that respect. And you know what? A lot of these kids don't have a role model like that in their lives. So, man, it is so important. And there's a lot of great people doing that kind of work. So We're not the only ones out there. And, hats off to everybody that's out there doing those kind of things.
No, absolutely, man. What's interesting, too, is, it's as much of I had as much as people like to vilify the idea and the notion of hunting, in many ways, it teaches people and kids to respect life even more so. And I think some people have a hard time really understanding how that could work. Because, you pretty much grew up hunting, am I correct? Yeah. And you're right. I mean, it's very difficult for them to understand that concept. Yeah. And so, for at least for me, I don't do enough hunting. I probably should. But I have friends who are horrible at taking me hunting. So that's a whole nother soapbox that I'm not going to get on. So let's talk about at least during your time, the culture of guns in the NFL. It's the public face of it in many ways is seen as anti. However, the real life component of it, i.e. guys who are pretty much readily identifiable when they go out. Usually considered targets in some instances, at least in the nightlife scene that I've seen. What is that culture like when it comes to guns and being an NFL player?
Well, look, you've already hit it on the head. I mean, the National Football League looks at it through the lens of a lawyer, or
liability.
Where would this be a pitfall? How do I stay away from something that I could be held liable for, or whatever, right? They don't look at it through the lens of, hey, in the real world, these men have guns. And they also are people that got money real quick. And so when they have a fast life and they're 100-mile an hour, shouldn't we wrap around them some support in terms of, hey, you're moving from one city to the next, you just got traded. Are you legally able to carry in that state?
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many reasons that the National Football League should be on the front end of educating the men in the National Football League versus taking the hands-off approach and saying, we don't do guns, we don't allow guns, you can't bring a gun on a stadium property, when in reality, so many men make poor decisions, and you've seen it in the past, right? It doesn't happen all the time,
but it happens enough to notice.
It happens enough to notice, and it doesn't have to happen. And one of the things that I was very fortunate to be a part of was the constructing and putting together, alongside 6 Hours Academy, and the people that are up there who are, as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Working with them to develop a handgun safety course for guys in the National Football League, and it was the first time it ever been done. We did it through the NFLPA and a partnership with 6 Hour. And the problem is, if the league doesn't adopt it and make it their own, it doesn't really work. So while I was proud, and we put a lot of work into it, we had a great pilot program. We got some guys educated. And we really handled and tackled those things like, what is, license to carry? What does that really mean? And what's that look like? And what's a concealed carry? And what's that law look like in your state? And how can the NRA and groups like 6 Hour Academy, how can they really help you to make sure that you're doing things the right way? Well, we had those in place, and unfortunately, it didn't translate completely into everyday life in the National Football League. But, we're still working on that one.
What's interesting is there was a period of time in this country where owning a firearm, or firearms in general, were an accepted way of life. Firearms have always been a way of life for everyone in this country. Whether you owned one or not, it was still a way of life because you were surrounded by people who had them. And now it's seemingly so. Firearms are just like, there's this attempt to kind of, instead of really understanding it, embracing it, and like you said, kind of wrap our arms around the idea of it, and then teach the responsible use of it. There's this kind of, like you said, hands-off approach where it's like I think recently they sent a bunch of gun locks to a lot of players in the NFL, and I'm like, okay, symbolically, I guess that on the surface is supposed to be an optics thing, but at the end of the day, that doesn't teach or provide the understanding necessary to understand the implications of owning a gun in this city or that city, or how to utilize a gun in the safest manner possible. And it's frustrating for me because I feel like if people would just take the time out to really learn and understand and have more knowledge about firearms, we'd be in a much better position in this country, not only to deal with just gun safety, but then start really taking substantial steps to approach just gun violence in general. But you have a bunch of individuals who are screaming the loudest and talking the most, and they don't know anything about guns. And so they do silly stuff like hand out gun locks, thinking that that's going to change something.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's funny how the people that have the platforms that yell the most, right? It's very reminiscent of a locker room, man. If you sit around a locker room long enough, you'll hear the craziest conversations, and they're always won by who's the most animated or who's the most intimidating and who yells the most.
Yep.
And we have that with a lot of our leaders, unfortunately, when it comes to guns, gun control, gun debates, gun talks. And here's the truth, though. There's not enough debate in this country. I tell my kids this all the time. I said, look, when you hear from your teachers or you hear from people when you're outside of our home and they talk about a debate, they say it in a negative way.
Yep.
Debates are what got this country to become the greatest country on earth.
Absolutely.
It was sitting down. You think our forefathers didn't sit there and have lively debate on a regular basis? What else were they doing?
Yeah.
They weren't on their Twitter. I promise you that much. They were sitting around the table. They were having real conversations. They were talking about things like this way before they became this myth. Like now it's a unicorn.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing that's real. So I think what we got to do is really start the debates, really keep having these conversations, and get these people that have no knowledge, no real experience.
Yep.
Like the Maura Healey, who took our guns away here in Massachusetts, made me a felon overnight because I own a 1022, so that my kids and I can go out and shoot. Because her definition of a rifle, an assault rifle, which is one of the great fictitious unicorns that they like to parade out there for the public.
Yeah.
She now made that 1022 an assault rifle based on her own definition,
which was based on a lack of knowledge.
A lack of knowledge. And she actually even admitted that she has no idea about, guns, gun safety, gun control. Yet those type of people make decisions on our behalf without any debate. And I think that's where the education has to come in, right? Is
Absolutely.
through those conversations.
Absolutely. So real quickly before we go, tell everybody how they can win some Super Bowl tickets.
We've got it, man. Playoffraffle.com. It's the easiest thing in the world, whether you're in your car right now or whatever you're doing. You go to playoffraffle.com and you're going to get a chance to not only have your airfare, your hotel, the pre-party Saturday night, and tickets to the game. It's $1 a piece. Anybody can join in. Buy as many as you want. We're raising a ton of money for the Light Foundation and the Greater Boston Food Bank. We're fired up about it. And by the way, I got to get you to the shootout, man.
Yeah.
Check out the shootout. We do that every fall. A whole bunch of celebrities. It's called the Celebrity Shootout. It takes place in Rhode Island at one of the best sportsman clubs that you'll ever go to. It's called Addieville East Farm. We got to get you out there, man.
When
It'd
is
be
it?
great. It's a sporting clays tournament. We have everything you can imagine. Every handgun, every rifle, even black powder stuff. We got all the toys. It's basically a circus for adults. We even
Gotcha.
have fly fishing, 3D archery, and then we end it all up with a big party at the end of the day. It's our signature event for the foundation. We've been doing it for 13 years. It's all about shooting, man. We say it's golfing with a shotgun, everything. And we love to, have a lot of fun throughout the entire day.
Hey, I'm down for it, man. Let me know the time and the place. I'll be there.
Hey, listen, it's been a lot of fun, man.
Absolutely.
I look forward to debating any topic in the future, man. Love what you do. Love what you represent.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much for what you're doing with the foundation, man. Thank you very much, man.
All right, buddy. We'll see you.
And we'll be back with Taya Kyle.